Okay, hi. I'm Jonah Burke. I'm a program manager on Office servers. And today I'm going to talk about the Business Data Catalog in two parts. So the first part will be about the features that the Business Data Catalog enables. So that's basically how do you build applications using external data with Office SharePoint Server 2007. The second part will be less about the features and more about the development process. So as we go through this, you'll see that there's a Business Data Catalog API, and there's also what we call a Business Data Catalog metadata model. So you have to write metadata to use a Business Data Catalog, and you can use the API. So in the second half, in the second hour, I'll talk more about that. So this will be more scenarios, and the second will be more technical, getting down and dirty. Well, before I start, let me just ask a question. How many of you guys are customers or work with customers that have data that is not in SharePoint? Okay. Hopefully that will be less soon, but for the time being, there's lots of data outside SharePoint. And how many of you have worked on projects to get that data into SharePoint somehow? Okay. So these two talks are all about making your life a lot easier, allowing you to build more powerful applications faster and with less code. So before getting into the features, I want to motivate this with some feedback that we got on SharePoint Portal Server 2003. And these are the top, just a quick summary, the top 6 pieces of feedback. The first is that customers hated writing this repetitive integration code. We told people to write web parts in order to get data out of other systems into SharePoint. And there's a lot of repetitive code writing web parts. There's also the hassle of deploying web part binaries to all the web front ends in your server farm, and then making sure that code is secure. So less integration code. The second point is that web parts give you pretty superficial integration. It's mainly a presentation level thing, and people wanted deeper integration into the core SharePoint experience. So that means lists, user profiles in My Sites, and search. So deeper into the integration into the places where people work. The third piece of feedback is that people aren't just building these point applications that show data. They're integrating data throughout their applications, throughout these composite applications. And so people wanted features that were composable, so that you could take data out from outside of SharePoint, mix it with things in SharePoint like content management, like personalization, and build these new classes of applications. Fourth, and this is just a very specific piece of feedback, no structured data search in SharePoint Portal Server 2003. We had document search, but it was hard to get the data from your database into the index. Fifth, people have a lot of investments in existing applications, and they were very forthright and strong about saying, we don't want to rebuild all those applications in SharePoint, but we do want you to let our users find those applications in the natural course of their work. So bridging the gap between the portal and existing applications. And then finally, a lot of the data that people deal with, like data in CRM systems or HR systems, is very sensitive. And so people wanted central management and auditing of who's accessing that data. So these are kind of the top pain points that are going to motivate the features that I'm going to show you. So as we go through the features, just think back to these, and I'll reference these again to see why we did this stuff. Okay, so here's a picture of the Business Data Catalog and the related features. So at the top, we have some blue boxes, and those are kind of the SharePoint features, the core features: web parts, lists, search, user profiles, and custom applications. At the bottom, we have web services and databases. Those are the two main ways that people are exposing their data. Now, in SharePoint Portal Server 2003, we told you basically to write the middle. We gave you a web part framework, and we said, you write it, and you deploy the code, and that's your integration solution. So in this version, we give you the Business Data Catalog. And the way it works is that you write a definition of a web service or database. You upload that definition into the Business Data Catalog. So that's into that database labeled metadata. And then once you've done that, the data types or entities defined in that definition are available to all the SharePoint features, so web parts, list, search, and so on. And this happens without writing any code. So this gets directly to that first pain point, which is less integration code. There's no hassle of deploying binaries on the front end. There's no writing repetitive code to display grids of data. So the Business Data Catalog accommodates two main types of systems, web services and databases. One other thing I want to sort of mention about this diagram is the data flow. This can be confusing. And so I've put little database diagrams to show you where the data actually ends up. So when I show you web parts that are using Business Data Catalog, those are always live views of data. The list integration features, the search, and the user profile features, in those features, the data actually moves from a system into SharePoint. And I'll talk about why we did that, the motivations behind that. So the web parts are live data. The other things are moving data into SharePoint. And then the custom applications is sort of whatever you decide to do. I should also mention that for databases, we support sort of a broad variety, SQL Server, Oracle, any data source that is accessible by OLEDB or ODBC. And web services are really the way we let you connect to things like BizTalk and existing business applications, sort of commercial business applications that have web service APIs like SAP or Siebel or PeopleSoft. So when you look at that last diagram, you might think, hopefully not, but you might think, this is just another thing between my presentation layer and my data. Why do we need this new thing? And what is different about this? Why is this different than, say, BizTalk? So this slide sort of gives you the design motivations behind the Business Data Catalog. Why is it different than other related technologies? So the first thing is no-code integration. So many integration technologies require you to write code and deploy that code. We didn't want to go that route just because of the pain people had around deploying and managing code on web servers. The second is centralized deployment. So you'll see that, and this is related. So you'll see that you upload a metadata in one place, and then those data types are available across your web farm. The third is that the Business Data Catalog is optimized for low latency scenarios. It's not like BizTalk. It's not a message bus or anything like that. It's optimized for real-time access to data. Fourth is centralized data security. So we have an authorization model in the Business Data Catalog which allows you to secure data in one place. And last is, and this is really the most important point, the abstractions or the concepts in Business Data Catalog are all tailored to portal scenarios. So that means querying data, personalization, indexing data. So this is a piece of technology that's designed really scenario-driven. So it's designed to enable new portal scenarios. So the BDC is not transactions, workflow, orchestration. For that, we let you connect to BizTalk or other orchestration servers via web services. So this is really a layer above that stuff. So now what I want to do is sort of stop talking in the abstract and just show you the features. So I'm going to go through each one of the features, do a little bit of talking and sort of the main points, but then get into demos on each one and just show you how they work. So the first is the business data web parts. These are a set of generic web parts that can show any type of data or any entity that you register in the Business Data Catalog. So one scenario for this kind of web parts is just a simple view of a customer. So say you want a page that shows customer details and orders for the customer and the account team. In Office 11, you would have had to write code and web parts to do that. In this version, you register those entities in the Business Data Catalog, and then you use this generic set of web parts to display data. So we would have told you, if you didn't want to use custom web parts, you could use clipping, but that sort of doesn't get you really very consistent presentation in your portal. Or we may have told you to use front page data view web part. But that sort of results in a lot of rework, and there's also sort of a limited number of things you can do, and there's other sort of limitations to the front page data view. So these web parts are designed to solve those problems, showing new data and new code with no binaries. These web parts support web part connections. So you can create master detail applications with little or no code, and I'll show you that. Has anybody seen some of the talk about the BI features, the dashboards and filters? Okay, so a core thing in BI is this unified set of filters and these interfaces so that you can filter lots of different web parts in consistent ways. Excel, SQL reporting services, SharePoint lists. And the business data web parts participate in those interfaces too, so you can place these web parts on a dashboard next to charts and other presentations of data. And finally, the web parts are customizable in front page. So you can customize the presentation however you want with XSLT without writing any new code. So let me show you a demo of these business data web parts. Before jumping right into the demo, I want to show you the process of registering something in the business data catalog, just to demystify it a little bit. And first, let me just show you exactly what we're dealing with here. I'm going to open SQL Enterprise Manager and show you the database that we're going to use. SQL 2000. Yep. Sorry. We support SQL 2005, though, of course. So I'll just show you this. It's a very simple database I'll be using in this talk and the next talk. Basically, there are only two key tables. There's one called account, and this has just got a name of an account, a fax, a phone, some other basic details, and then account team member. So accounts have people that work on the accounts. And this is related to accounts. So this has the people's login, email, first name, last name. Of course, this is a very simple example just for the demo. Could be a lot more complex. So let me first show you the business data catalog application definition, or metadata. I use those two terms kind of interchangeably for this database. And I'm going to go over this pretty quickly right now. And in the next session, I'll get into a lot more detail on every tag in this file. So kind of the outermost tag of this file is an LOB system, and this just defines a connection to a database, basically, or a web service. So you see it's LOB system, type equals database. We have the idea that you can have different databases with the same schema and instantiate them multiple times with different connection strings. So that's the idea of LOB system instances. This is where you actually see the connection string to the database. So the LOB system and LOB system instance give us a database and a connection to the database. The next part is, what's in the database, and what that means in business data catalog language is what entities are in the database. So in this case, we have the main entity is account. So this defines the account entity, and then within entities we have methods. So methods are basically operations on entities that allow you to get data related to entities or do other operations. And so for this entity account, we have one method called find accounts, which is just getting me all the accounts from the database. And then we have another method called find account, which gets me a single account from the database. Let me scroll over here. According to a certain ID. Now, within each method, there's a definition of the parameters going into the method and coming out of the method. And that's the case for both databases and web services. So entities are groupings of methods. Entities can be related with associations. So in this case, I have two entities here. I have account and I have account team member. And there's two associations. Accounts are organized in a hierarchy. So we have accounts related to themselves in a hierarchical relationship. And then accounts are related to team members. So we have the account to account team members association here. So that's very quick overview. I'll go into a lot more depth. Question?
You're not actually going to make us write that by hand, are you?
Well, it's a good question. So right, the question is, do we have to write that by hand? Or actually the question was, are you seriously going to make us write that by hand? So first of all, we'll provide a lot of samples. So you're not starting from scratch. But it's true that we don't have plans to provide a tool to create this metadata. We do not have plans. What there is, though, and I'll show you this in the next talk, is there's a really rich API for creating this stuff. And we hope that third parties will use that API to build tools to create this metadata. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. OK, so this is the definition. Let me now import it into the business data catalog and connect the business data catalog to this database. So the business data catalog is a shared service, just like user profiles or search or Excel services. And that means that the data you register can be used on multiple virtual servers and multiple sites. So this is the shared service provider administration page. Here's the business data catalog section, and I'm going to click Add Application. This is prompting me for a file, so I'm going to browse to that file called crm.xml. And I'm going to click Import. And now this is going to take the file, it's going to parse it, it's going to validate it, and it's going to store it in the database. Now, and that's it. Now that database is registered with SharePoint, and all those features are now available. So you can see here I've got this application called CRM. It's a database. It's got 2 entities. Now, when I did that, what also happened is that we generated something called a profile page. A profile page is one of those 360-degree views, and that'll give you a very simple way to view an entity. So by default, we generate something very simple that looks like this. It's just a list of key value pairs. We expect that for important entities, you'll take this further by adding new web parts, by customizing the look of these web parts, and so on. So in this demo, what I want to do is take this profile page and, using the business data web parts, make it look a little snazzier.
Did you connect, or did you copy all that data into another container? What did you do?
Good question. So the question is, did you copy the data into a new container, or did you just connect? The answer is we just connected. So all we did was upload that metadata into the database. And when you view this page, it's actually that web part is asking the business data catalog for data, and the business data catalog is doing a live query against the database. So this web part that's already on this page is actually an instance of one of the business data web parts. This is called the business data item web part. And this will show one instance of any entity in the business data catalog. So in this case, it's showing one account. What I want to do here is show some data related to this account. So I said that accounts are organized in a hierarchy. I want to show all the child accounts of this account. So what I'm going to do is put the page into edit mode. Before I go further, let me just point out this business data item builder part. This is a somewhat strangely named part with a simple function. It takes that account ID you see in the query string, and it serves it up to other parts by web part connections. So you're going to see me connecting things up to this business data item builder. All that's doing is getting that query string value into the other web parts. So let me click Add a Web Part. This is actually a cool feature right here, too. This is a new way to add web parts. Much easier to use than the gallery. And what I'm going to do is add a business data related list. This will show me a list of things related to this account. So in this case, this is going to be a list of child accounts. Click Open Tool Pane. And here we have this box called Type. And this allows me to choose one of those entities. We use the term type in the UI because it's more friendly for users. But I'll use the term entities. This allows me to choose an entity that I've registered in the business data catalog. So here I can see all the entities I've got, and I want to show accounts. So I'll click Account and click OK. And now I'll select a relationship, child accounts by account. And I'll click OK. Now, just to make this look a little nicer, I'm going to click Edit View, and I'm going to turn off some of this Chrome at the top so we can see more of it. OK, so you can see now this web part first of all, it's been named account list automatically, which is nice because we know the name of the entity. And it's also providing me some inductive text. It says connect this web part to web parts that provide account. And it knows to do that because it has the metadata. It has the definition of that relationship. So I'm going to go back into edit mode here. I'm going to use the web part connections menu and get related item from that business data item builder part. Okay. And now you see that I've got 3 accounts in this list. That's because the account I'm looking at, which is Worldwide Dental, has 3 child accounts. So that was pretty easy, a pretty easy way to do master detail. I didn't have to know anything about database queries. I just needed to understand the concept of a relationship. One problem with this is it doesn't look very good. So now I'm going to take some XSL that I've written and style this to make it look a little simpler and nicer. So let me get the XSL. I'll just copy and paste it. And you can see that this web part, the business data related list web part, has the same UI as the front page data form web part because it's actually derived from that part. So if I open this in front page, I could use the WYSIWYG experience. Here I'm just going to cut and paste some XSL into the tool pane. I'll click OK. And now I have a much simpler, cleaner view of these customers. Now, just to make this look a little nicer, I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to hide the toolbar. I'm going to set the width to a fixed width. And I'm going to just show the title bar. And let me just move that over into the right zone. Okay. So here we go. That's a pretty good little profile page, and it wasn't a lot of work. I didn't have to write any code. I didn't have to mess with data sets and things like that. If I click on one of these customers, I navigate back to the same profile page. Let me show you. Let me do this. Well, actually, I think we don't have a ton of time, so let me go on to the next little thing. So this is a nice data-driven page. I think there's another class of applications that these business data web parts are really useful for, and that's a more dynamic kind of application. So suppose you wanted someone to come in and explore the set of accounts that were out there and be able to sort of select and browse in a more rich way. So let's do that. Let's build an application like that called Account Explorer using these business data web parts. So here again, I'm going to put the page into edit mode. I'm going to add a web part. I'm going to add the business data list web part this time. This web part is similar to the business data related list, except it doesn't require sort of a parent. It doesn't require a value over web part connection. It just shows a list of everything. So this is going to allow me to show a list of all the accounts. I'm going to do the same thing here and just show all the items and hide some of that Chrome. And now I'm going to add sorry, let me just I'm going to hide some of that Chrome, and I'm not going to show all these values. I really just want to show the name of each account. Okay. Due to a bug here in this build, I actually have to go back into web part properties and click OK. Now what I want to do is when someone selects an account in that list, I want to show two things. I want to show more details about the account in a separate web part, and I want to show the account team members that deal with that account, plus a link to those people's My Sites. So I'm going to add the business data item web part. I'm going to select account. I can also quickly resolve just by typing and clicking Control K, just like in Outlook. Oops. And now I'm going to get an item from the account list. So now when I select an item in the account list, I can see details over in the business data item part. And you'll notice that when I connected it, radio buttons came up in the account list, so that makes this into a more dynamic application. I can also add another related list, so I can show the account team of this customer. So I'll select account team member as the entity, and here the relationship I want is account team members by account. I'll click OK. I'll connect this web part to the account list, just like I connected the item. And here again, I'm going to go in and make it look a little nicer with XSL. By cutting and pasting. I'm going to click OK. And now if I take this page out of edit mode, you'll see that when I click on different items here, I've got both the account team, so some related data, and I've got details about that account. Thanks. So that's pretty cool. Very easy, no code, much less work than it would have taken you 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, so another one of those pain points was lack of structured data search. So in Office 11, we provided a lot of access to different types of documents and different types of content stores. Lotus Notes, web servers, file shares, and so on. But we didn't let you do something as simple as take a database table and put it into the index. To do that, you had to write a custom protocol handler, write custom filters, and that stuff is difficult to do. So in Office 12, there's no need to do that stuff anymore. Now we've connected the business data catalog to the search system so that if you register an application in the business data catalog, you can optionally make it searchable. This is totally integrated with the search system. So business data catalog items just become items in the search index. So all the features, have people seen the search talks at all? Okay, a few people have seen the search talks. There's a ton of new search features. There's a totally new scoping system. There's new UI for search results. There's much better property and schema management. All that stuff accrues to the business data, the items in your databases, because business data catalog content just becomes first-class content in the search index. So let me show you an example here of how we would crawl this database that we've registered. So if I go to Shared Services Administration, search like the business data catalog is a shared service. I'll click Search Settings. And I'll click Content Sources. So a content source is just a starting point for a crawl. So I'll click New Content Source. Now, these 4 content sources, SharePoint Service Websites, File Shares, Exchange, those were there in the last version. Business Data is the new type of content source in this version. So if I click Business Data, I'll see, I have 2 options here. I can crawl the entire business data catalog, or I can just crawl a certain application. In this case, we only have 1 application, so I'll just crawl the entire business data catalog. I click OK. There's my content source. I click Start Full Crawl. Okay, this is going to take a few minutes. So while this is going, I'll describe exactly what's going on here, how we do this. So in order to crawl something, you need to provide a certain type of method in the metadata. And I'll go into this in much more depth in the next talk. But that kind of method is called an ID enumerator. And this enables sort of a two-phase protocol to happen. Enables search to use a two-phase protocol to index any type of data that's registered in the BDC. So in the first phase, search requests all the IDs of an entity. That's the ID enumeration phase. In the second phase, search requests a single request details for each entity. This is very similar, if you're familiar how the people import works in the last version. This is very similar to that, except now it's applied to any type of data. So you just provide that ID enumeration method, and then your data is crawlable, whether it be web service or database. So hopefully that was enough spiel to make this finished. Just to make sure this worked, let's look at the crawl log. Okay, so you can see we have crawled the 4 accounts that are in our database. And now if I go to account search, I've actually set up a tab called accounts. Now, all sites and people are tabs that come out of the box, but this UI is extensible now. So you can add new tabs. It's very easy to add new tabs. And here I've added one called accounts. So if I click accounts and I type dental, I'll get search results on that database. I can also do things like combining full text search with parametric search. So suppose I want dental in the East region. Region is a property of those items in the business data catalog, and now I can apply that to searches also. So now I've narrowed it down with a parametric and a full text search. Now, these results look kind of sparse, crappy, just not very nice. And that's because they're the default result format. Another new feature of search, so in the last version of search, if you wanted to change this results format, you'd have to derive from the search results control, write a bunch of code. Well, now the search results web part is also an instance. It's derived from the data form web part. So just like I can style the business data controls, I can style this search result control. So I'm going to put the page in edit mode and make these search results look slightly better. I'm going to admit they're not that much better, but get the idea across. So you can see, just like the business data web parts had this data form web part section, so does the search result part. I've got an account search results XSL here. So I'll paste this in, click Save, click OK. And now you can see, let me just publish the page. You can see that I've got a custom format. So I've got a special icon, and that's going to be specific to accounts. I now display the website, so I can jump to the customer's website directly from the accounts. And I've got these links for parametric search. So I can click East and get all the accounts in the East region. And this is totally customizable. You can do whatever you want using any of the properties that are in the search index. Another thing to notice here is that if I click on a search result, I'll go back to that profile page that we built at the beginning. So this profile page, just like the My Site is kind of the one place to view a person in the last version, this profile page is the one place to view now any entity in the business data catalog. So you'll see lots of features are going to drive us to this profile page, and search is one of those features. So that allows you to present a consistent view of these data types to your whole enterprise. And actually at Microsoft, we've done a little pilot program on our intranet, and we've exposed our Siebel customers on our intranet. So now you can do full text search over our CRM database, and you can see data. So it's actually proven to be really useful, and we're trying to move towards this single view of the customer on our intranet. Okay. So business data web parts and business data search give you good ways to find and visualize data. But what happens when you want to incorporate the data more deeply into SharePoint applications? Many SharePoint apps, as you guys know, are built on lists. And when you can get data into lists, that data becomes very powerful. You can do lots of things with it. And in this version, even more things, like workflows and versioning and all these new things that lists get. So the business data in lists feature allows you to take data from the business data catalog and put it into lists. This actually while it sounds useful, I think it's good to motivate it with a couple scenarios. So let me motivate it with 3 scenarios. The first is, suppose that I'm working on a proposal for a customer, and I store proposals in a document library. It would be nice to be able to tag that proposal with the customer, and not just type in the name of the customer, but actually pick that customer from my customer relationship management system. Second, suppose I'm on a small we do this at Microsoft all the time. As you know, we got tons of bugs, and we've got these huge bug databases, and there's a few bugs that are critical for each team, and often we need to annotate those bugs with more data than you can in the bug tracking system. So this feature and we can't go to that person that owns the bug tracking system and say, can you add these 5 fields for my team, right? Because it's sort of an enterprise managed system. So this feature allows us to take those key records, put them into a list, and then extend them with metadata by adding columns to the list. The third scenario is, suppose there's a canonical list of something out there. Like you've got some master data system, and you've got the canonical list of cost centers, or the canonical list of building codes, or whatever. A lot of times what happens in SharePoint is you have to use lookups to lists, or you require people to key that data into lists manually, and that leads to a lot of data duplication or dirty data. With this feature, you don't have to do that anymore. You can create a column in a list that actually is a lookup to your system of record. So let me show you this feature, business data in lists. So here I've got a document library, and it's got proposals in it. It's got a document, it's got the status, it's got the owner, but it lacks, the most important piece of data about the proposal, which is who the proposal is for. So I'm going to create a column that's going to be a lookup to the CRM system we've been using. So I'll click Create Column. I'll name the column Account. There's a new column type here called Business Data. And just like the web parts can display any kind of data in the Business Data Catalog, the search system can index any kind of data, this column can hold any kind of data in the Business Data Catalog. And one interesting thing to note about this feature is that this is built on top of a new Windows SharePoint Services feature called Custom Field Types. So you can also implement, you could implement this if you wanted to, and you can implement all sorts of other custom field types. This is just one instance of a custom field type. So I chose business data. This is that similar type picker, and I'll choose account. Now I can do a couple things. I can say what value of account I want to display in this column. So I'm going to choose to display the name of the account. And then I can also pull in some related data when I choose an account to put into the column. So suppose I often need to access the customer's phone, and I want to know what region that customer's in to create views. I can do that. So I'll select phone, and region. Click OK. And now I've got this main account column, and then I've also got these 2 related columns. Now these related columns are just normal SharePoint columns. You can do view, sorting, filtering. The only difference is you can't delete them. They're deleted when you delete the primary column, which is account. So now let me edit one of these documents. Under account here, suppose I know, I think there's 2 scenarios here. One is that I work with an account all the time and I know the key. It's kind of like the scenario when you type an email, you always know the person's alias. In that case, I can just type the account ID, press Control-K, and it'll go out to the database and resolve that and show my display value. When I click OK, it'll pull that display value and also phone and region into the list. Now, I can filter on this. I can do whatever I want with it. This data is now in the list. Question?
What gets stored in the list, the ID or the text?
Both get stored in the list. So the question was, does the ID get stored or does the text? And the answer is both. The reason we do both is we need to maintain a reference. You'll see in a minute we can update the data, so we need a reference. But we want the data in the list so you can do things like views and filtering. And we really wanted to stay away from the idea of some kind of distributed query when you viewed a list, mainly for performance reasons. So we copy the data into the list. Now let me add one more thing to this list. If I don't quite know what I'm looking for, I can click this Browse button. And I can get sort of a conventional picker, just like the people picker. The thing that's interesting about this picker is that it's totally dynamic. So this adapts to the filters that you define in the business data catalog, and it can show any type. It can allow you to pick any type of data. Okay, so now I've got those items in the list. Now suppose that I go and change something in the back-end system. So this phone number, right, for Worldwide Dental is 9999. Let me go change that to 6666, the ominous 6666. Now this little refresh button looks just like the Excel refresh. Allows me to update this column. So if I do that, we'll go to the database, and for each record, we'll pull the latest data into the list. And now you can see we've got 6666. Let's see. So, yep, go.
Batch that update overnight or anything? I mean, if you got a huge list there of a huge set of data, could you batch that update? Could it happen overnight instead of real time like that? There were thousands of items there. It would take quite a while.
Right. So, I mean, it is asynchronous. So if you clicked it, it would run as long as it needed to. To be honest, I'm not sure about the programmability of it. I think what you might want is some way to write a little app. You can't schedule it, but I'm not sure about the programmability. What I'd like to let you be able to do is to write a little app that will do that on a schedule. Right. Okay, so one more thing to note here is if I click on one of these guys, again, I'm going to go to that profile page. So we're driving people back to that consistent view. So the features I've shown so far are read-only. What happens when you want to write some data back to the list? So for that scenario, we have a feature called Actions. And all an action is, it's very simple. It's a URL that you can associate with an entity. And that URL can be a link to an InfoPath form, to a web form, to an existing application UI. So the philosophy here is that we didn't want to include updates in Business Data Catalog because they often require things like transactions and compensation and features that are already in other systems like BizTalk. So instead, and also in existing application UI. So instead, we allow you to link to forms. So the prescription here, if you want to build a new UI, is to build an InfoPath form that talks to a web service, whether it be BizTalk or a different web service, and then to link that form into the Business Data Catalog. So just like in the last version, the little presence pawn follows people around. Wherever you see a person, you see a presence pawn. In this version, an action icon follows any entity around. So this is kind of genericizing the idea of actions. And the goal is, it gets back to that pain point of allowing people to bridge the gap between their portal and their existing investments. So these links can be, links into your existing systems, links into your existing business applications, and people can now find those applications from the portal, not having to go to some other place to find them. So let me show you a demo of the Actions feature. So I'm going to go back into the Shared Services Administration UI. And I'm going to go into CRM. This is our system. And I'm going to click Account. And if I scroll down here, I see, here I can see, the name of the entity, account, the application it's in, the fields, the relationships, and the actions. So by default, we create this one action called View Profile, which is a link to that profile page that's created. And I can add other actions here. So I'm going to add two actions. I'm going to add one that shows me a map of where the customer is located. And I'm going to add another that shows me some news about the customer. So So here's the link for news. This is just a link to MSN news search. And you'll notice that there's a little token in this URL, this bracket 0. That basically allows me to parameterize this URL. So I'm going to bind that 0 to the account name. And so the name of the account will be passed into search. I can also put a little icon. This is cute. So let me put a little icon on that. And you can see my little newspaper. Yeah. Office Online, that's where I found it. And let me do the view map action also. Now here I have a few parameters. Let me make sure I got the whole thing. I have one parameter for each. Oh, whoops, I'm putting that in the wrong box. I have one parameter for each component of the address. So I'll just do address, city, state, and country. And again, let me take the time to put a nice little picture in here. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so I've created 2 new actions. Now let me go back to the list here. You can see there's this little icon next to the action. This is basically just like the presence icon, except it's for business data items. And if I click there, I'm now going to see those 3 actions. If I click View Map, it'll take me to Windows Live Local, and I can assure you that that's the correct address because that's the house where I grew up. So. Now if I click View News, oops, let me go back here. And if I click View News, I'll be taken to an MSN search page that gives me news on dental equipment specialists. So an interesting thing here is that these actions are going to show up in more than just lists. So if I go back to the profile page, these actions are going to show up on the account part. If I go to Account Explorer, these actions are going to show up in the drop down here where I see an account. So, yep, question?
Does SharePoint take care of URL encoding those parameters for you?
It does, yes. Yes. So, yeah. So basically the idea here is to just make these actions very pervasive, just like presence, and to drive people to your existing assets. Any questions about these before I go on? Yep.
How is application level security handled? So if I've got my own line of business application and I've got my security roles and stuff stored in there, how can I expose that out to SharePoint?
Right. So the question is, how is application level security handled? So you actually have a couple options. I'm going to get into this more later, but I'll just answer the question now. So there's a couple different authentication modes in BDC, how BDC authenticates to the back end. If you have application level authorization, you'll need to use one of the impersonation delegation modes to get the user's identity to the back end. So that means using either Kerberos delegation or single sign-on to get that identity to the back end. The problems, so that's one option. The problems with those options are that they don't scale very well because you can't use things like connection pooling. And so we also have another feature where you can actually pass the user's name as a parameter. You can tag a parameter, and the BDC will automatically inject the user's name into that parameter and pass it to your backend system and do the authorization there.
And search will handle that as well?
Search actually will not handle that. So the thing about search is search always crawls as one account. And so we can't maintain item level permissions in search. What we can do is maintain entity level permissions in search, but we can't do per item permissions. I guess does that make sense?
Well, it's disappointing, but makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. I totally agree. Okay, so again, in the last version, we heard a lot of customers that said, you know, the MySite stuff is great, but we have a lot of personal data that's not in our Active Directory, not in our LDAP directory. It's in other systems. And in Office 11, you had to write code to get that data into the user profile store. In this version, we've connected, just like we've connected search to BDC, we've connected user profiles to BDC. So you can join the user profile with external systems without writing any code. So a couple scenarios that this feature would enable are, if you have a CRM system, you could get the list of accounts that each salesperson deals with into your user profile store. And then you could automatically show them personalized news for those accounts. Another one is you could get your cost center out of an SAP system into the user profile. And then when a user goes to a dashboard page, that dashboard can be automatically filtered by that user's current cost center. So the way you get the data into the user profile is by using sort of the BDC user profile integration. And that's just a matter of taking excuse me, a property of an entity and mapping it to a property in the user profile store. And then during the import process, we'll take the data and put it into the profile store. When you want to use that data, and Venki, did you guys see Venki's talk? Some people saw Venki's talk on personalization. There's a type of filter in this kind of filter ecosystem called the user profile filter. And this will take a value from the user's profile and pass it around to parts on the page. So you can use that filter to get, say, the cost center out of your user profile and then pass it to your dashboard. And then you have automatic personalization of all the data on a page. So that's pretty powerful stuff. Between the BDC integration and the user profile filter, you can get business-specific targeting and personalization using data that's not actually in your directory. Any questions about that? So, so that's the part about that's sort of the part about the features. I also want to talk a little bit about the API and the metadata model. Just a little bit. I'll go into a lot more detail in the next session, and I guess we only have about 5 minutes, so I'll try to go through this quickly. The first thing about this development process is that there's sort of a key shift, which is that for many integration tasks now, there's no need to write code. Instead, you write this metadata for the business data catalog. And so we think the development cycle for business data catalog applications goes something like this. An analyst defines business requirements. An IT pro or developer writes and tests the metadata. An IT pro uploads that metadata to the catalog. And then an analyst, not a developer, can go build these applications using the features, just like we saw. So this is a little bit of a shift. I mean, you'll see in the next talk that for a lot of tasks, there's still plenty of code to write. But I think for many applications, like some of the master detail stuff I showed you, it won't take a developer to build those anymore. Let me skip this stuff because I'm going to go into this a lot more in the next talk, and just talk about the security model a little bit, because that's actually a question I get a lot. It sounds like people have interest in that. So there's kind of two sides, and it looks like I don't have that slide. Okay, so there's kind of two parts to the security story. One is authentication, and the other is authorization. So for authentication, we basically have two patterns. And when I say authentication, I mean authenticating from the business data catalog tier to the database or the web server, the web service server. We basically support two patterns. One is trusted subsystem, and one is impersonation delegation. So the trusted subsystem just means you're using a single account to go from the business data catalog to that other system. And this is good if you want to use connection pooling, and if you don't have needs around per user auditing or per user security. Now there's a couple different ways you can achieve each mode. but I won't get into that level of detail. The other mode is impersonation delegation, and that's where you actually plumb the user's identity to the back end. So this is where you'd use Kerberos delegation, or you'd use single sign-on, or you'd use that application level passing the user's name as a parameter that I mentioned. So that's kind of the authentication half of it. The authorization piece, we again support sort of two patterns for authorization. So the first is if you've got authorization in your back end, then just what I talked about before, you've got to get the user's identity to the back end somehow. The other piece, the other half of it is if you don't have authorization information in the back end, or if you want to use the trusted subsystem model, we support an authorization model in the business data catalog. So you can actually secure entities in the business data catalog. And this is a big advantage. This means that you only need to learn one authorization system, that you can secure all your data in a consistent way, and you can secure it in one place in the business data catalog. So finally, just a few calls to action. So the first is use the business data features to build applications faster. The second, and I think these other ones I'll get into more in the next talk, but is expose your line of business applications, the apps you want to integrate with SharePoint, as databases or web services. Those are the two strategic Microsoft integration technologies, and those are the two things we support. The third is to write business data catalog friendly web services, and I'll get into that more in the next talk. But that means using the primitives that the business data catalog understands, like ID enumerators if you want to do search, or like the finder methods that I mentioned at the beginning. The fourth and the fifth are to use the APIs, which I'll talk about in the next talk, to simplify your integration code. And to get to that question about the tool, the last is to use the administration API to write tools. I think there's a big third-party opportunity to write tools to simplify some of the stuff, some of the authoring for business data catalog. So I'm out of time. I want to leave enough time for questions. So that's it for this half of the talk.
Excellent, Jonah. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we do have 15 minutes for questions on this piece. Line up here at the microphone, and we'll do as many as we can in 15 minutes. Thank you.
You entered there in the entities a select statement to the database. Can you also use stored procedure names?
Yes, you can use stored procedures, tables, or SQL or raw SQL.
Ah, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Just a moment. For those of you who are leaving now, can you please try to do it somewhat quietly? Thank you.
Does the business data catalog just duplicates the schema of the underlying data source, or is it also a kind of layer of abstraction? So if my underlying database has slightly changes like columns renames or something like that, what will I have to change to keep my applications running?
Right. So there's two halves to what the business data catalog does. First, it represents not so much the schema, but the API of the back end. And sometimes that's mixed with schema because for SQL, if you've got SQL statements, it's schema. But it represents the API. So if you change the API to your backend system, you will have to change the metadata. The second half is semantics about that API. So what entities are on it and some other things, like you can make friendly names for fields. So there's kind of two pieces. But yes, if you change the interface to your system, you'll have to change the business data catalog.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the refresh data option in the list, is that a specific privilege you can lock down, or is it tied to something in the list because you might not want everybody to be able to do that?
Yeah, that is, you can lock that down. There's a right on an entity called execute or read, which allows you to get data for that entity, and only people with that right can use that update.
Okay. So they're the only ones that will see that icon when they view the list. They're the only ones that will see the little refresh icon.
Everyone will see the icon, but if you click on it and you don't have rights, you will not be able to use it, which I realize is not the best.
Right. Okay.
Sort of, yeah.
Have you done any scalability or performance? It just sort of, you had an example there with like 4 accounts. Have you tested it with like 100,000 or 300,000?
We've only tested up to 4, and we only support up to 8.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're on a 64-bit machine, we can support 16. No. Yeah, we've done scale testing. There's a couple. Are there any specific areas you're concerned about?
Well, yeah, just lists of things that are measured in like hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands.
Yeah, so for just querying data, there's lots of things you can do to limit bad queries. So you can specify maximum numbers of rows to get back. You can use filters to allow users to filter what you can get back. But the fact is, if your metadata allows somebody to query for 1 million records, they can query for 1 million records. And that will not be good for your web server. Because at some point, those 1 million records will be in memory. So you want to author your metadata thinking about sort of limiting the data.
Give me an example. Like say the account. It would be pretty typical to say have 15, 20,000 accounts.
Right.
How would you cache that, or what kind of filtering would you put on that on your little SharePoint list that you had there?
Right. So you would provide filters so people could query based on criteria, and then you would put an upper bound on how many accounts somebody could get back at once. So and the UI will say more than 100 or more than whatever the max is matched your query, narrow your query, if you specify a max.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, I have 2 questions. They're both kind of related to versioning, but they're in different areas. So picking up on the question that was asked before, if the underlying, the data source changes, and you need to have a new version, if you just update the metadata and keep what's exposed in SharePoint the same, all your existing lists continue to work?
Yes. So, well, it depends. If the apps you've built depend on things that leave,
Sure.
suppose you delete a
right.
field.
When you remove things, there's a problem.
That's
right?
going to cause problems. But if you add, then you're fine. You can update the metadata and things won't break.
Okay. And then the second question is around the crawling. Is an incremental crawl over the business data catalog something that's supported?
Yes. You can do incremental crawls if you return along with the ID a last modified date for each item.
Okay, so as long as your source has a last modified concept in it that you can map. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yes. You showed us an example of where you had the account content data type defined. Would it be possible to have the data type with 2 entry fields? Like first you have to choose the account, which would be the company, and then you would have to choose the location dependent on which company you had chosen. Would that be possible?
Let me see if I can understand.
So first you would have a selection, and then you would have a second selection based on the first.
Okay, and then based on that, you'd have see some other grid of data?
Yeah.
Yeah, that scenario is supported. So for that, you'd have to have sort of a 3-level relationship, entity A related to B related to C. And then in the web parts, you'd select something in the first, see the related records in the second, select the second, see the related records in the third.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing you can do too is actually we support associations with multiple sources. This is kind of an esoteric feature, but in SAP you have to choose sometimes 2 things to get 1 thing. So you have to choose a sales area and a customer in order to see orders for that customer. So we support that type of association.
Okay, would it be better than to have like 2 different fields then, or just as a one business data catalog field?
It sounds like for your scenario, what you want is 3 entities related in a hierarchy,
Okay.
A to B to C.
Yeah, thank you.
But if you want, you can.
We're getting very noisy in the other side. Guys, over here in the corner, if we all stare at them, maybe they'll. If you do need to really talk, it would be much better for the Q&A to do that outside because it gets hard to hear. Thank you.
A lot of large customers have replicated data across several line of business applications. For example, their customer data, and some of them find it useful to use an operational data store, or ODS, which becomes like the single version of the truth, just for a limited set of information that's replicated across those environments. Did you consider providing the option of an ODS as well as the metadata in the business data catalog?
Yeah, we did consider building a big cache of data, but we decided that that wasn't really the design point for business data catalog. And so we enable you to connect to an ODS if you have one. And I think there's other tools, at Microsoft and by other companies that let you build an ODS much better than we would have been able to deliver. So
Sure.
yeah.
I keep hearing about support for like Siebel and SAP,
Right.
kind of out of the box, but I don't want to write that ADF, right? So, are they ADS that just come out of the box, or how does that work? Especially since both those applications can be extremely customized
Right.
per person. How's that work?
So we're working on definitions, business data catalog definitions for SAP and Siebel. We don't know how they're going to ship yet. They may be a web download. They may be on the CD. We're not sure. The way we've addressed the customization issue is to just focus on the core schema that doesn't change. So in SAP, nobody changes a certain set of BAPIs, and those are the ones we use. Same with Siebel. They're really, these things will be starting points for big companies. So it'll show you how to do it, and then you'll have to take it further.
So will it be via web service? I mean, I'm assuming you're not going into the schema tables, right, of Siebel or SAP. Is it, or are you?
No, it is via web services.
By web service. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Hi. In the demo we are seeing, we changed one record from 999 to 666, but it updated both of them. Is there a way to restrict only to updates by some timestamp or some version flag or something?
No.
Because when all the concern about updating large lists, if we are only updating the updates, that probably.
Yeah, it's a good feature. We don't support it. So, thanks. Sorry.
Which authentication mode can I use for authentication against a web service on a different machine?
Yes. So for web services, let me recall. Sorry.
Oasis?
Oh, Oasis, was that the question?
Okay, actually I have this problem normally of authentication against the web service if it's on a different machine.
Right. So for authentication against web services, you can use NTLM, Basic, Digest.
Okay, but not Windows authentication?
And yeah, Windows is NTLM, same thing.
That normally doesn't allow me to cross the network boundary.
Oh, okay, across a network boundary. Right. So for that, you'd have to use Basic or Digest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you provide me some sample of that afterward?
Yeah, so sure, you can come up afterwards. It's actually not difficult. So if your web server is using Basic or Digest, then the BDC will negotiate with it. You just have to enable your web server for Digest. Yep. But if you want to talk afterwards, I can show you exactly what it is. Okay.
Or questions for Jonah on this part? Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Jonah.
Thanks.